I'd like to welcome all of you to another installment of the Princeton School of Real Estate training series, sponsored by Wydell Realtors. The title of today's program is How to Build a Personal Library of Sales Tools. I'm Scott Monahan. I'm Career Development Coach at the Princeton School of Real Estate. This is also a continuing series of educational classes which will be recorded for future use. So what we are asking all of the participants is to kindly hold your questions until the end, and we can address them with the Wydell staff that's standing by. So if you would kindly mute your telephone, we will have a better recording outcome. So let's talk about what is a personal library of sales tools. What they are presentation tools commonly used in the practice of listing and selling real estate. Moreover, what they represent is the individual associate's ownership in the material that's being presented to the client. From my experience, the best real estate agents in the marketplace have a personal arsenal of prepared presentation tools ready for immediate use. Now, let's talk about why should we have a pre-prepared library of tools. Well, number one, they offer a consistent model both in form and content. So when we have a model to use, we will generally have it embellished with all of the proper branding. The format of it will be found in a professional manner, and the order with which the material is being presented, and to a strong degree, the content of the messaging that's in the model will be very succinct and more comfortable for the agent. My point is that if you vary from every appointment that you go to by recreating the wheel every time, you're going to have a variety of tools that you're going to think are individualized for the particular client, but you're not going to have any consistency in your performance. So the second item as to why we should have a pre-prepared library of tools is they represent your personal best presentations. So for many of us, we're operating with a time challenge and not enough tools handy to always give it our best. Well, in this case, if we have the model established as to what we want to present, then it's easy to replicate. And even if it means that you put it on a color copy machine and you recreate it that way, the end result will be probably better than if you haphazardly try and create these things one-on-one as you need them. And then most importantly, and this is probably the preeminent reason why you want to have a library of tools at your disposal. From my personal experience, from my professional experience as a professional trainer, from having made hundreds and hundreds of listing presentations, I know that it takes at least 5, and I'm probably being way too conservative on that, 5 to 10 times that you present the same material until you start to get a flow as to what you want to say, what is succinct, what is to the point, what is most effective for your particular purposes at that given time. So by having consistency in what you present, it allows you to perfect your presentation skills and replicate them over and over and over. And I'm going to give you some examples of that as we go. Now, I'm going to elaborate in the course of this program on 8 specific tools. However, I just want you to know that that does not represent everything that you should ever put into your personal tools library. Your library should continually grow and grow and grow. There are going to be things that over time you'll just get better at presenting, and then you'll modify them, and there'll be things that will come up that are new challenges for you, and when you create a presentation for that, you should be saving that, and you'll find multiple uses for the same material over and over and over. Now, when you develop a library of tools, you should absolutely keep them in a clean very, as though they are the most important presentation tools that you have, and in a file folder so that they don't get smudged, they don't get bent, they don't, and that way, if you have to make a presentation on fairly short notice, as I said with regards to the copy machine and the like, it is easy to replicate. I would also tell you that those items that are most frequently used, it is a good idea to have them already pre-printed in multiple sets, because how often do we get a call from somebody that we have to end up meeting in the next half hour or an hour, and there's very little time because we're pressed with other things. That way you pull out a particular package, put it into the right folders, bind it properly, and you're on your way. So with that said, let's get started. Now, some of the tools that I'm going to talk about may be familiar to you, and some of them may be newer ideas that you have not dealt with in the past. Perhaps the company hasn't put anything together that is exactly akin to what I'm suggesting. But what I would tell you is that for most of us, we should be creating our own version, or I shouldn't say version, but supplementary tools that will embellish what we want to say for our own use, and then also to embellish what the company supports and include the company materials. So I'd like to suggest that we talk about each tool, and I may be somewhat repetitive when I speak in terms of each individual usage, but I want you to know that this is intentional and it's to provide a better instructional outcome. So with that in mind, let's talk about the 8 tools that we're going to be discussing today. Right now I'm going to give you the list, and if you'd like to jot them down, and I'll put a couple of notes to it, we can go over the list, and then I'm going to backtrack and we're going to talk about each one at a time. So the list that I have, and again I've said that this is by no means the end-all list for building a library, but the first of which is really paramount, and that is for you to have a biography or a resume. Now, we have been working on that at Wydell for a little while this summer, and obviously your resume should show up on your Wydell website, it should show up on your Zillow and any other web migration sites that you're going to use. But most importantly about having done the resume or the bio is that you need to learn how to present it. So when I come back through the list again the second time over one by one, I'll make some reference points as to what I'm talking about with regards to presenting it. The second one on my list is what I call an introductory packet. Now, an introductory packet is one of the Wydell folders. They're red folders that have placed 2 pockets, one on each side, right and left, for your information and for information that you're going to disseminate to the client, as well as your business card. We're going to be very, very specific about what we want to put in that, and we're going to use that for multiple purposes with everybody that we meet. Number 3 is your Wydell Marketing Services presentation book. That would be either in the form of a notebook, or it could be in the form of a bound looking presentation of all of the Wydell corporate services. I'm going to make some recommendations that if you are using a 3-ring binder, or if you are having it bound by either spiral or the machines that you have in your offices, there are some things that you should personalize as well in that book, meaning that that would be a place for, again, your resume and your biography, any personal accomplishments or awards that you've attained. So this becomes then, again, an example of how you would personalize your Wydell presentation booklets and or tools. What also might be included in that, and I'll mention this at this time because I don't plan on spending a tremendous amount of time on the Wydell Marketing Services presentation book, But there are statistics that are put out by the company from time to time that demonstrate that Wydell has achieved a certain percentage increase over the marketplace from the year before, or some of those items, and they could very well be included in your Wydell Services book. So if you can picture this in your own mind, if you had the Wydell Services book, and the first couple of pages of it are those things that you put in that are beneficial to you and demonstrate that the company is progressive and successful, those are all very, very helpful items. One of the items that relates to the Wydell Marketing Services presentation book is a tool that I have used consistently, and I think that it's worth mentioning here. So this is not something that has been presented to you, to my knowledge, before, and that is that I have created for myself, and I would recommend that you do the same, a marketing checklist or a marketing key elements list. And what that is that it becomes a tool that you'll either use in your introductory packet, you'll use it in your presentation materials, you'll use it in your MBA, and it's a list of those things that are the most important elements of the marketing that your company has to offer. So to give you an example, that could include current market conditions, that could include the number of multiple listing services that you belong to, the use of yard signs and sign riders and the effectiveness of that in the marketplace. By the way, according to the National Association of Realtors, those two items alone represent 9% of the activity that you're going to get on a house. All of the corporate affiliations and your web migration, and then your personal expertise. So what I'm suggesting is that there should be a one-page sheet that you use both in presentations and also to include in your silent sales tools to let people reacquaint themselves with either all the things that you have had to say or those things that you'll be talking about when you meet them the next time around. So I call that the Wydell Marketing Services Outliner Checklist, the key elements. The next one on my list is Sphere of Influence printouts. Now, this is not something that's been spoken about before, but I know that the Wydell agents through MoxieWorks has access to their complete Sphere of Influence database. It could also include those people that are listed with Wydell Network News and that database. Now, the reason that I'm suggesting that you might want to have a printout of that as a sample, if you have been particularly aware of your sphere of influence and that's a significant part of your marketing program. Some of you who are familiar with some of the concepts that I've been talking about is that with regards to sphere of influence, every individual knows at least 5 to 10 other people very, very closely. So if you had a list that was complete and you could print that out and it would perhaps look like 10, 15 pages of one-line printout, and you were able to put that in as a sample in your marketing services exhibits, what you would be able to say is that here are 300 people that I market to regularly. Well, if every one of those people knows 5 or 10 other people, that could impact as many as 3,000 people. Those are the kind of pictures that tell 1,000 words to your clients. So again, I'm going to recommend a sphere of influence printout list from your MoxieWorks, whether it be your sphere of influence or your neighborhood news. The next one, which I have, I believe, is number 6, is a sample market value analysis. At Wydell, it's a market value analysis as compared to a CMA. But this should be a comprehensive sample. This is a standalone tool, and I'll spend a little bit more time on that in this session as to what that should include. but there are multiple uses for it. For instance, if you are meeting with a seller on a first-time meeting basis, and it's the preview appointment, step one, and you say to the seller, I'm going to be doing a market value analysis, and that could be very abstract to a seller. Whereas if you are able to pull out a sample and say, this is an example of what I'll be bringing back, what it does is it increases the perceived value of what you're going to be bringing back. And there are multiple uses there. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as we go through the session. Number 7 on my list, there are 2 items on number 7, and one of which I've talked about briefly when I said Moxie works, but the neighborhood news promotional presentation. Most of the agents at Weidel did not have, to my knowledge, a promotional tool for presenting neighborhood news. You're able to talk to your managers. There was one that was created briefly, and the intent is that if you were to be developing your sphere of influence, and the purpose of the neighborhood news is to increase the number of people that you have contact with, well, it would be helpful if you had a visual aid when you're talking to somebody who is a merchant that you do business with, or even a close friend, to say, this is what neighborhood news is. Well, I'm going to take it one step further, and I'm going to suggest that I would create a postcard. Now, this would not be a postcard that I would intend to mail to anybody. What it could be is, instead of a postcard size, it could be a 3x5 card size, which would be smaller than the smallest postcards that you would do. And my intention would be to have a promotional picture of some sort, logo, of what neighborhood news is all about on the front side of it, and obviously the title, which is neighborhood news, and perhaps at the bottom a byline, which is a features to benefit statement as to what the benefit of getting neighborhood news would be to the consumer. On the reverse side, I would have a number of fill in the blanks questions, which would be their name, their address, their phone number, their email address, and all of the contact information that you would require. The reason that I'm suggesting that this should be a pre-prepared tool is that it would be very easy to have on hand, whether it's in your purse or whether it's in the front of your appointment book. You could have 5 or 6 of those cards with you at any given time. And when the opportunity presents itself, when you're with somebody that you say, this is somebody that I should include in my sphere of influence list, you could very quickly pull out this promotional card and say, by the way, since we're talking, I just wanted to show you and show them the neighborhood news promotional card that you did. Well, the purpose of that is they could actually keep a copy of it, and on the back side of a second copy, you could jot down all the information, and then you have it, and it's in a formalized situation where you will lose it and it'll get turned in, and it's just a way of developing over a period of time a bigger and bigger promotional list for you to do business with. The last one, number 8, is a price reduction presentation. Now, there are about 4 key elements to the price reduction presentation, but that is specifically a tool that you can use and replicate over and over and over. I'll give you an example very quickly as to how that could be used, and then we'll start back down the list and try and make some more sense of it. On a price reduction presentation tool that you may put together, that could include a quarterly market report. It could include the number of views on a Zillow report. It should include, from showing time, the number of showings on a sample listing, the way that feedback is presented both to you and to the client. It should also include, from your Weidel Hub, a couple of the charts and graphs. The 2 that I'm specifically thinking of is the Weidel Real Estate Market Work, which shows value of pricing correctly versus the value of the stagnation that could occur when properties are overpriced. And the second one is a triangle, which is titled as positioning your home in the market. I would include 4 items in the price reduction presentation tool. So the quarterly market reports with the Zillow views, showing time, an example of showings versus the feedback that you get on a given listing, how the real estate market works, which is one of those graphics about overpricing, and positioning your home in the market, which is also another graphic about pricing right. The reason that I'm bringing this up right now is to say, when you prepare these tools and you get used to presenting them in a very, very positive manner, you will find multiple uses for them. So I've said that this is a price reduction tool. What I also think is that this is a tool that should be presented during a listing so that a seller knows exactly what feedback they're going to get and what other reports are available to them as the market makes its decision about their house and their pricing. And it's a way to say, when we need to talk again, we'll see how the market is doing us, and this is exactly how I'm going to come back and show you all of the results. That's an example of using the same tool for multiple purposes. And that is probably the second most important thing that I'd like to get across today. So the intention of being repetitive is, if you have a specific tool and then you present it 5, 10, 15 times, you have to get good at presenting it. Likewise, if you have a tool that works for one circumstance, you can present it in numerous circumstances. So that's the two underlying philosophies of what preparing a marketing library is all about. So let's talk briefly. We're going to go through the list 1 through 8. Some I'll embellish more than others, but I'm going to back up right now. If you've been keeping track and you have a list, the first one was your biography and your resume. Now, I'm going to try and be very, very candid about this, but we have done some work on some promotional tools, or educational tools, I should say, that relate to how to build your bio or your resume. One of the things that I think is most important from the standpoint of it being a standalone tool, and also from your being able to present it, is that it should include a narrative. So you can list your accomplishments, but it should have a paragraph, preferably next to your picture, that has a paragraph or a narrative about your accomplishments. Some may be outside of the real estate business, some may be in the real estate business. But my point is that if you have that and you practice 5 or 10 times, preferably you practice on your own, but if it has to be in front of customers, well, that's the way the learning curve works for most of us. Here's the reason that I bring it up. If you were to put a copy of your bio in the front of your MBA, which is one of the things that I'm going to come back to, if you are not comfortable at presenting your bio, then what will happen is you'll open up the page, and it'll be the first page in the report that you're bringing having to do with pricing in the home, and you'll say, by the way, these are my credentials, and you're welcome to read them at your convenience. My point is that you lost a valuable opportunity, and secondly, the consumer will probably never read it. So it's important that you're able to take that page and say a couple of really significant things about what differentiates you from the competition and sets you apart. So that's an example of where you need to have this and use it again and again and again. So the first thing is, and I'm not going to continue on about the biography or the resume, but you absolutely need it both for your web presence, but you need it for virtually every piece of material that you ever put out to a buyer or a seller. So, number 2, I'm going embellish on the introductory packet. That's the Wydell folder that you should be preparing anytime you meet anybody for the first time. Now, the packet or the folder, I think you should be familiar with the tool, the envelope that has been created, and it has a left side and it has a right side. My position is that the left side belongs to you. The right side belongs to the consumer, whether the consumer is a buyer or a seller. So I'm going to be very specific about what I think should be in there. Now, this is not to say that this is the maximum that should be in, although I will tell you that I think there is a point of no return. It's kind of like if you ever went to a convention and you walk through the exhibit hall and you end up with so many brochures, 99 and 9/10% of them will never get looked at again. That's a danger if you put too much information in this introductory packet. But first and foremost, what it should be is your bio and your resume. So now we're starting to use it for every purpose that we're imagining in the real estate business. What I would recommend in addition to that are those things that distinguish your company as being successful. So for instance, Wydell leading real estate, #1 in sales would be an excellent tool. I think that the maximum exposure tool is an excellent one because that speaks to the web migration and everything associated with that. And finally, I believe that the cultural piece, which is a small booklet, is a tremendous tool for the introductory packet. The purpose in this is that I know that real estate agents do not always close the sale or close the listing on the first appointment that they ever meet somebody. And so if you're meeting with a seller, and this is a first step walkthrough of the house, they should be getting one of these introductory packets, and you're going to leave it with them. So what will happen is that the seller may very, very well read through all of that material before you get back. Certainly, if your bio is compelling enough, that should set you up to a better presentation when you come back. Now, let's talk about the right side of the introductory packet. If we're meeting with a seller, I would absolutely include the tax information that relates to their property. If you have never seen the property before, it's not necessarily appropriate that you bring all of the comparables. I know that some agents will bring, if it's a subdivision, they'll bring all the comparables for a particular area, and they'll include that in advance. I'm not going to weigh in on whether I think that that's appropriate or it isn't, but I know that if we put the tax information in the front of that, it will cause the seller to want to keep your packet because it's information that is personal to their individual property. And so when I meet with a seller for the first time on the walkthrough, and I say, thank you very much for allowing me to come through, but I brought you some information. And whether I show them the packet at the beginning of the appointment or the end of the appointment, and I say, let me show you what I brought you, it gives me an opportunity, again, to make reference to the narrative on my biography. I can point out that there's some educational material about the size and scope of Wydell, and then I can specifically talk to them about the tax information related to their property. The perceived value in the preparation there will be well worth your time. Now, by the same token, if I have put together these materials that I will routinely put in the left side of the introductory packet, now if I'm meeting with a buyer, I may be meeting with a buyer for a counseling session in the office for the first time. I may be meeting with them at a specific house that they called in on. Whatever the reason is, any important information that would relate to the client should go on the right side, but always the company, services, and my bio should go on the left side. What will happen again is that if you get used to having consistently that package, whenever you meet with somebody individually, you'll feel much more empowered when you sit down with them And again, it gives you an opportunity to present that same material 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, and you'll get better at it. One of the other things that I did bring up as a new tool, and I'll mention it again right now, is that if you have thoroughly digested your seller marketing services with the Weidel presentation manual, and then I suggested that another tool might be to create a one-page checklist of those things that are the consummate things that you do to get a property sold. That would be a recommendation that I might put into the front cover of the Weidel introductory package. So that may well be included with, if it's for a seller, on the company side of my marketing materials. So I look for as many places to use those materials as absolutely possible. All right, let's move on. I'm not going to say a lot about the sphere of influence printout, but I will say that one of the things that you could do is if you are using a Weidel marketing services book, it would be easy to put one of the plastic sheet protectors, if it's a 3-ring notebook, a plastic sheet protector or a couple of sheet protectors in the very back of the book, such that you can slide that list in and out so that it doesn't look like it was printed 5 years ago and you're using it over and over again. It can look to be fairly current. It doesn't have to be up to the date month by month, but it needs to look like it is a fairly current sales tool. So those are examples that will differentiate you from your competition. Now let's take one more stab at the sample market value analysis. I have some very specific thoughts that relate to what should be included in that sample market value analysis. As I said to you before, where could we use it? Well, if I'm meeting with a seller for the first time and I pull it out as an example of what I'm going to be bringing them later on, obviously it's not their house, but it would be an example of what they would get. Now, this may make more sense to you than as I have given you the list of the 8 items so far. Those things that I think should be included in a sample market value analysis. And this is bound and it is branded to Weidel and it looks professional. Number 1, and this is the exact order that I would put them in, your biography or your resume. That should be the first page after the cover. That should be the first page that they see. And included on that cover bio or resume should be all of your contact information. So that means your telephone number, your email address. The reason for that is it is entirely possible that you will not get every listing on the day that you make your presentation. And that market value analysis may hang around for quite a while, and if at some point the seller decides to that their circumstances changed and they're now ready to do something, they need to be able to contact you very, very quickly, and they may have lost you. So your biography is first. Second thing is the corporate information. So that would be all of those items that we would include in the packet for the introductory packet. The reason for that is if it was important enough to put into the introductory packet, because these are the important elements that set Weidel apart, well then we want to do that. We want to put it in every piece that we give them that's going to stay with them. So there's no problem when you open it up if you were to say, by the way, this is the same information that I gave you in the initial packet, but I put it in here just for your purposes. There's no problem with that. Now, I will tell you that for some real estate agents, and I'm not particularly advocating this, but for some real estate agents, the market analysis is the presentation. They do it based on their personality. They've been in the business long enough. And so if you have 5 or 6 pages in the front of your MBA that relate specifically to the company, that may be enough of the tools that you'll need to make that presentation. The third item that should absolutely be included in the front of any MBA is the seller's tax information. Now, I know that when you gave them the introductory packet, you said the left side of the packet was our company information, the right side related to the client, in this case, a seller prospect. So you gave them the tax information in that packet. No problem. Put it in there again. And the reason is that if there's something in that market value analysis that relates specific to their property, then they're going to want to keep that MBA. The other reason that it's important to put that in there is if in the of the comparables, what is still for sale, what is sold, all those things that come from Moxie Present or you get out of the local listing service. One of the items that is a benchmark is, as it can be found in the tax information, is the amount of square footage or perhaps the year that the house was built. Those are some benchmarks that you can use to compare their property to all the other properties in the comps list. So there's multiple reasons that the tax information should be number 3 in your MBA. And obviously the comparables, which would be the available properties sold and the under contract. And then, as I said previously, the last thing that I would put in the MBA, I had suggested that you need a price reduction presentation, and I listed a number of things that relate to that. At the very, very least, what I would suggest that you put in the 2 sheets that come out of your Weidel Hub, which is the how the real estate market works and the effect of overpricing and cause stagnation, and positioning your home in the market, which is the triangle for fair market value. Those things should be at the end because ultimately the decision as to what you price it at is an art, not a science, and they need to know a little bit of the theory behind the art. So that pretty much concludes what I would put into a sample market value analysis. The 2 remaining items that I have are the neighborhood news promotional. I don't particularly have anything more to say about that than what I've said previously. I think you need to have a promotional tool or tools. I suggested that one might be in a little bit of a bound presentation. It might be as small as a card. But my point is that if don't take you 5, 10, 15, 20 times of presenting that, so you get really, really good at presenting to a prospective consumer what the neighborhood news will do for them and why it would be valuable for them to get the market statistics and so on and so forth. But the other reason for the neighborhood news promotional presentation is I think that that should become an absolute staple for open houses, meaning that if you consider who goes through an open house, we know that there's a percentage of neighbors that live in the immediate area that will go through an open house. They may be nosy neighbors, but they also may be people who are contemplating to move and just haven't decided when to pull the trigger. So if they took the initiative to go to an open house, then why wouldn't they want to know what's happening around them? And neighborhood news is the perfect vehicle for that. So whether it be a bound presentation that demonstrates what neighborhood news is because they happen to walk into an open house, or whether you pull out a postcard of which they can stick it in their pocket, you keep one and fill out the back cover of it, and then submit it to MoxieWorks, whatever it takes to do that. So that's an example of, again, multiple uses for the same tool. The last one that I'm going to discuss today is the price reduction presentation. And I did say a number of things about it so far, and I used the price reduction presentation as part of our listing presentation because it will be, I guess the question is, have we ever, this is rhetorical obviously, but have we ever taken listings at a price that we thought was a little bit higher than what we wanted to take it at? Now, truthfully, I've actually been surprised that some houses have sold very, very quickly at a price price that was higher than I thought. So I don't happen to have a crystal ball when it comes to pricing. That's why the tool that's positioning your home in the market, the triangle, and if you're familiar with the tool, if you're not familiar with it, you need to get familiar with it. The higher the price, the smaller percentage of the market that they will attract. Well, what that means is that if we have that discussion on a listing with the seller, and we say, let me tell you how this is going to work. Number one, this is our quarterly market report, and this is our Zillow report. Ultimately, you're going to see the amount of views that come through on the internet. And then showing time. If there are showings on it, we'll get the feedback, whether they think the price is too high. The market will, and then ultimately we'll have to adjust to meet the market, and that's the triangle. So my point is that if you have this presentation in its entirety, number one, I'm saying it again, you'll present it multiple times, you'll get much better at it, and you'll use it as a crutch for more times than you think could ever be. The other important quality of the price reduction presentation is that what we're really talking about here when we speak about the Zillow reports and the number of views that come online. The market has changed, and we all know that. People will look at a sign, and then they'll go look it up online before they react. Years ago, they used to just call up a sign. Now they'll do their homework. So what has happened is that the web has become the great equalizer. If it's out there, it's out there. That's what maximizing your exposure, the tool in our introductory package is all about, and the tool that's in your marketing services. Well, you need to get accustomed to saying that again and again and again. I think that would be a good tool to present along with the Zillow report, because we know that there's Realtor.com, there's Trillia, there's all these things. You can't report on every item that anybody can react to, but you can report on the Zillow hits, and if there's 700 hits and there aren't any showings, that tells you that the market is different, and you'll get better at presenting. So, in conclusion, my thoughts are that if you have, as the best real estate agents that I have ever known in the marketplace have, a set of tools that you are comfortable with, that they are at your disposal, that you don't have to think about to use, that you have presented multiple times, you will sound like you have more expertise than any of your competitors. So I want to thank you very much for attending the program today. At this point, I will turn this over to the Weidel staff if there are any questions to be had, and I look forward to talking to you again. Thank you very much. Hope it was worth your time.
Thank you.